Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar which is being hosted today by Fern and Mighty Earth on the European Union's Deforestation Regulation. We're going to be hearing a lot today about how the regulation, despite some of the negative headlines we've heard, is driving positive action by governments, companies and farmers. We're waiting for a lot of people to attend this extremely important and interesting webinar today. So we'll just sit tight for a couple of minutes while we let everybody get on. And then once we've got a critical mass, then I will start the introductions in a couple of minutes. Hi, as I just said to anybody who's just joined, we're just waiting for everybody to come into the webinar because there's quite a lot of people trying to join, and we'll start in a couple of minutes. Okay, we'll just give it one more minute just so I can still see the numbers are ticking up. And so once we'll give it another minute or two, and then we'll get started. Okay, great. So I think we'll get started, and everybody will slowly, hopefully, come into the session. So welcome everybody to today's webinar. My name is Philippa Nuttall. I'm editor of Sustainable Views, which is a publication from the Financial Times, and I'll be moderating the session today. So before we get started, I've just got a couple of housekeeping announcements. Everything that's said today is on the record, so you can quote it, repeat it, do whatever you want with the information. The event's also going to be recorded, and a link will be shared with you after the event. There is also live interpretation in English, French and Indonesian. So if you click on the little globe symbol at the bottom of your screen, then you can choose the language that you want. And also we want this to be as interactive as possible. So please drop any questions into the Q&A box again at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can. So we're delighted to be joined today by a stellar panel of experts. We have Raoni Rajo, who is Director of the Department of Policies for the Control of Deforestation and Burning in the Brazilian Environment Ministry. Juliet Cody, who is Global Lead for Climate and Nature at Barry Callebaut. Michael Amoa, Deputy Director of R&D at the Ghana Cocoa Board, otherwise known as Cocoa Board. Masuestis Dato from the Indonesia's Palm Oil Smallholder Union, also known as SPKS, and Katja Albrecht, who is an advisor at GIZ, which is the German Agency for International Cooperation. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us today. That's great. And before diving into our panel discussion, though, I'm going to pass over to the hosts of today's webinar for a couple of opening remarks and to set the scene for us. So we're going to start with Glenn Horowitz, who is founder and CEO of Mighty Earth. So over to you, Glenn, please.
Thank you so much, Philippa, and thanks to all my fellow panelists. Judging by the size of the audience today, if there's anything that can draw a crowd, it's the minutiae of European environmental regulations. I salute you who have joined us this morning. You understand that these minutiae translate into life or death for many forests around the world and the wildlife and people who rely on them. Indeed, let us examine why we are here today. First, the European Deforestation Regulation is one of the most important international conservation policies of the last decade. It is conservatively projected to save 720,000 hectares of forest that bulldozers would otherwise wipe off the map, with hundreds of millions of tons of associated climate pollution. And yet, stroll the corridors of power in Brussels for a few hours, and you'll hear the great moan of a herd of high-heeled and loafered lobbyists whining on about the EUDR. Pitchmen for the giant Canadian timber companies, their vast northern forests recently turned to smoke, but by what they call their sustainable management practices, lament their inability to discover where their raw materials come from. I kid the Canadians because I love them, and because I've spent the summer breathing the haze across the border hundreds of miles from their fires. You'll hear lobbyists for an American agribusiness, whose name I couldn't possibly mention, say that despite being the largest food and agriculture company on the planet, while they'd love to protect forests, the problem is really the poor smallholder farmer whom they hold so dear to their bosoms and who can't figure out how to comply with the requirements of the law because of a lamentable lack of education. And if only you, Commissioner, or you, Parliamentarian, had a chance to meet one of these salt of the earth who hate the EUDR, then you would understand. I have long said, when agricultural executives start banging on about smallholders, you know they're scoundrels. But here is the good news. The reality is vastly more heartening. Contrary to the image of ignoramuses painted by their erstwhile corporate representatives, large groups of farmers on the ground are organizing themselves for compliance. They understand that in many cases, they have a competitive advantage. In most crops, the overwhelming majority of deforestation is a product of corporate plantations, not smallholder farmers. When you fly over Borneo or Brazil and see clearing out to the horizon, that's manifestly the creation of hosts of bulldozers, not villagers engaged in agroforestry. And as you'll hear today, these smallholders have a thing or two to teach those Canadian timber lobbyists. To be sure, agricultural communities will benefit from deploying the resources available from Europe to ensure that ag traders include them in their supply chains and don't cynically exclude them in the name of EUDR as part of an entirely unrelated strategy of vertical integration, or because they'd rather deal with company counterparts rather than communities growing food. But I also want to emphasize that most regulated businesses aren't whining, but preparing. In our meetings with the biggest rubber, cocoa, palm oil, and even some soy companies, they express gratitude for EUDR and say it has helped them learn more about the supply chain. And so some of the association lobbyists trash the law to politicians, but those same companies are touting their compliance to their customers. This is a big deal. And I know that with Philippa monitoring, the brilliance of Fern, and our all-star panelists, your interest in the minutiae will be rewarded many times over. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn, and that's great to frame it in such a positive way. That's a good start for today. And so, Nicole, we'll pass over to you now.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to warmly welcome all participants today. It's great to see how many people have tuned in to learn about the progress being made towards implementing and preparing for the EU Deforestation Regulation. This regulation has been one of the centerpieces of the Commission's president, the European Green Deal. With the climate crisis at its height, though, and we've witnessed the floods, we have witnessed the fires this summer, climate and social adaptation needs to happen simultaneously and swiftly. And forests and fair prices are part to this. Now, at Fern, we're eagerly awaiting the timely implementation of this law, and are curious to hear today what progress countries, partners, and commodity producers are making to green production and how they pay attention to social issues such as fair burden sharing across the supply chain, and how they are using this law to advance on solving long-standing issues such as fair prices for farmers. I agree, there has been a bit of a vacuum and probably too little information by the European Commission on how the preparation for this centerpiece legislation is progressing and how it intends to support and protect smaller players, smaller farmers in the agricultural and forest industries, so they can ensure to harness the transformative powers of transparency in this regulation. We hope that the transition period, so the time now until the regulation enters into application, will be filled with meaningful dialogue between governments and supply chain actors, and with concrete actions to ensure the fulfillment of the two objectives of the regulation. One, to halt global deforestation, and secondly, ensuring European consumption is not driving further forest loss. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you to Glenn. And I think Glenn's very powerful words that this is a matter of life or death sort of put the EU minutiae into context. So before we go into the details of the regulation, I'd just like to set the scene a little bit for anybody who's not followed this perhaps from the beginning. So last year, the EU set the global standard for ending commodity-driven deforestation by adopting the EUDR, or the European Union Deforestation Regulation. And so normally from the end of December this year, it will be prohibited to place key products on the EU market or export them from the EU unless they are deforestation-free, are produced in accordance with the relevant legislation of the country of production, and are covered by a due diligence statement that indicates no more than a negligible risk of non-compliance. So the EDR covers 7 commodities: cattle, cocoa, coffee, oil palm, rubber, soy, and wood, and many derived products that are listed in the annex to the regulation, including chocolate, coffee, rubber products, soybeans, etc. The law was passed with strong backing from government, companies, and NGOs. However, since then, we've seen increasing international political opposition against implementation of the regulation. And there's mounting pressure from various quarters for the law to be delayed or to be weakened, which, as Glenn said, would be devastating for global forests. Our discussion today is designed to address those concerns and to demonstrate that the EUDR has already led to important changes in highly forested countries that will be decisive to reducing overall deforestation. So the expert panel that we've already introduced includes speakers who are active in various supply chains covered by the EUDR, and they're going to show how they're already gearing up to be compliant in time by the end of this year. We're also going to hear today from those small-scale farmers that Glenn mentioned, from producer countries, that are seeing the legislation not as a barrier to what they do, but as an opportunity to improve their livelihoods and to give themselves continued access to European supply chains. So there's going to be plenty of food for thought today. And as we said earlier as well, please do, as the discussion goes on, ask your questions in the Q&A. So I'd like to start with our expert panel today, and I'm going to give them all a few minutes to give a couple of opening remarks, and then we'll ask some questions. So we're going to start with Raoni from the Brazilian Environment Ministry. Raoni, I know you may have to dash off, so we'll start with you and give you plenty of time to speak. So if you'd like to just give us a couple of opening remarks about how you see the EUDR. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Philippa, and thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So very briefly, my name is Raoni Rangel. I'm currently Director for Deforestation Control Policies at the Brazilian Ministry of Environment. The way we see the EUDR, is important to highlight that it is an additional requirement in relation to our legislation. And so, of course, we are focused here as government to implement our current legislation. But at the same time, we do have a medium-term targets, and especially one target established by the Brazilian president, Lula, is to reach zero deforestation, zero legal and illegal, by 2030. Of course, with some level of forestry growth to compensate some level of legal deforestation as well. And for that, we need to really work hard in terms of implementing better traceability systems, monitoring systems, and of course, show that and integrate that with market practices. Within our two main plans that are already being published, the plan to reduce deforestation in the Amazon and the plan to reduce deforestation in the Cerrado. Now we are preparing plans for the rest of the country. But in both plans, we do have traceability and real-time monitoring as one of the cores of the plans. And one of the key reasons for that is that we realize, and we actually show that within our plan, that even though we have the IBAMA and ICMED, which are our forest rangers, and also as well as the state level agents working hard and issuing embargoes to farms with illegal deforestation, there's a recent study published by researchers from the Brazilian Institute for Space Research that showed that around 87% of the areas under embargo did not recover. So it means that they still maintained as agricultural areas, and as such, the cattle being produced there and the soy and etc. is being bought by someone. So it's really, really important that, especially on the first line of the EUDR, which is the compliance with local laws, is really, really checked, because otherwise, without making sure that the whole supply chain is actually adopting in practice better practices and avoiding buying from illegal deforestation, we're not going to be able to reduce deforestation significantly. But we do have some good news, and especially there has been movement on the side of the federal government. So right now, the Brazilian Ministry of Agriculture is developing a system called Brasil Mais Sustentável, so More Sustainable Brazil, which is a voluntary system in which farmers which are willing to show the compliance level as well as the adoption of other good practices, agricultural practices, or certifications. They join the system, they provide information to the system, and they get a certification from the system. It's a system for the whole of Brazil. It's still under development, and it is voluntary. So of course there are major challenges there also in terms of uptake, but it's definitely an important step forward because it provides the opportunity for farmers with good practices to show that. But also in the meantime, we do have the states of Brazil taking the lead in different areas. And one of them, also it's important to clarify, is that according to Brazilian legislation, there is a delegation process when it comes to the verification of environmental compliance. So according to our legislation, the states of Brazil, they have the primary obligation to check for environmental compliance of farms. The Brazilian government at the federal level, it works in a complementary way, especially in areas in which you have federal land. So then we have the obligation to go there, or in areas that we see that the states are struggling to deal with illegal deforestation. So if the state is not able to go there and find the illegal deforestation, we go there and work in a complementary way. Because of that structure, we do welcome at federal level initiatives at state level, which are already moving forward and bringing on and starting monitoring farms. And so we have here a set of systems being adopted by, right now, we have here on the screen 4 states. 2 of them, the state of Pará, which was the first one to develop and implement the system. So and also Minas Gerais, those systems are both operational, and those systems, they do daily updates, bringing together information on the farm, information on the embargo, information on deforestation, and also traceability information. So not only what's happening on that specific farm, but whether that farm, for instance, has bought cattle from other farms with deforestation. And also there are other states which have similar systems under development, in particular Acre, which is the one you can see on your farmost left, also in the Amazon, the state of Maranhão, which also in between the Amazon and the northeast area, also Tocantins, which is a state also in the legal Amazon, and also we just got recent news about another state, the state of Espírito Santo, is moving forward towards there, which is a smaller state by the side of Minas Gerais, and also there is another major agriculture state that we got information is moving forward, but since it's not public yet, I'm saving that. So just to say that we are, and all of those systems, they have an important characteristic. The systems developed by the state, they are built upon public data, governmental data. So because we have already in Brazil a system called CAR, the Rural Environmental Registry, which is mandatory. So every farmer in Brazil has to be in the system. If the farmer is not in the system, he's not allowed to obtain loans. In some states, it's not allowed to actually buy or sell cattle, so it's quite restrictive. And so what those states have been doing is they have taken that universal system as the basis and complemented that with other data. So since the farmer already have obligations to register the car, to issue invoices, to issue documents, to movement cattle, it's already providing lots of information to the government. So it's not necessary to provide again a new set of information for a system specifically for traceability. So that means that right now we already have 1.8 million. We have 1.8 million individual farms already being monitored daily in Brazil, which represent about a quarter of Brazil's farms in total. And so that's definitely some good news when it comes to the need to check and to enable also buyers, responsible buyers, to know what they are buying.
Excellent. Thank you for that introduction. That's super good to set the scene. I mean, obviously, traceability and monitoring are 2 key points of the regulation, and is something that certain countries are saying is going to be very difficult to do. It sounds like Brazil is already well advanced in this area. I mean, are there some lessons that you've learned that you could potentially share, and how do you optimize this system? I think you said 25% of farms are covered in Brazil. How do you now optimize this system to make sure that a majority of farms are now covered?
Well, it is. It can be through two ways. All farmers will join the federal system, but then it would go on an individual basis. And of course, from the moment in which markets require farmers to register, I'm sure we are going to have a big wave of farmers joining the system, or you have a political decision at local level to make the system with public data already available. But what we're definitely seeing, talking to some states, especially states from areas, even those states with higher deforestation, is that they know that the majority of farmers are not problematic. The majority of farmers are not deforesting, especially in the southern part of the country, but also in the Amazon. So, and if you are not able to tell the good from the bad apart, everybody's bad on average. And so in a sense, it is an advantage for farmers not being able to tell the good from the bad. But of course, it is a delicate matter. Also, there are many major technical challenges involved here. And so the technology is of course, Brazil is a major powerhouse in relation to that. It's a global leadership in terms of forest monitoring. But of course, there are different challenges, both political and technical, that need to be overcome.
And in terms of overcoming some of those challenges or complying with the EUDR in general and deforestation, I mean, you were obviously working on this before the EUDR, came on the scene. How important is it to have a collaboration between the state and private companies, or even with other countries, so that you're sort of not working in isolation?
Yeah, that cooperation is definitely very important. But what we see sometimes is the sort of, when a private company look at the government, it thinks, well, bad news is coming, right? It's either taxes or fines, and so it sometimes is difficult to overcome that kind of this diffidence. But it's definitely necessary, especially because what we have here, when you look at the EUDR, but also other requirements, it's to show legal compliance with the country legislation. And even though sometimes private companies, they would lean towards private solutions, which they feel more comfortable with, a private solution cannot give a statement that farm follows the law, because that's the government's obligation to do that. That's the government capability to do that. So I think I think it's something which is slowly changing, especially in some states, they are seeing the government as a partner in this, as someone that can help. But that's that's definitely a long way forward.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I'll move to the other panelists now, and if you can stay for a bit longer, that's great. If not, thank you very much for participating today, and good luck with the rest of the implementation. So Juliette Cody, I'll turn to you now for your opening remarks, if that's okay.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Juliette Cody. I represent Barry Callebaut, the world's leading chocolate and cocoa products manufacturer. Barry Callebaut sources every 5th cocoa bean grown worldwide. And as we speak, on the 5th of September 2024, the cocoa harvest is about to start in many places, specifically in West and South Central Africa. So in a few days, in Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, farmers will start collecting cocoa beans. And in a little over 100 days, cocoa beans imported by Barry Callebaut in the EU will be subject to the EUDR. I joined Barry Callebaut 18 months ago, specifically to design and implement the group's approach to EUDR. And today I wanted to share what our approach has been at Barry Callebaut to comply with the upcoming regulation. If we could move to the next slide, please. So our approach is focused on risk reduction and is structured around 3 elements. The first is sourcing knowledge and guidelines. I work very closely with my sourcing colleagues, analyzing where the products are coming from and making sure that we categorize volume by levels of risk, ensuring that there is knowledge across the organization on risks associated with each purchases that are being made and decision on the purchasing side. The second element that our approach relies upon is a due diligence toolbox. So we have developed a comprehensive due diligence approach based on 7 tools that are geared towards either assessing or mitigating risk of non-compliance with the EUDR. So I'll give you an example of the tools that we use, for instance, to assess risk. We rely on satellite imagery and deforestation monitoring technology to assess all the cocoa plots that have been mapped in our supply chain and identify whether or not there is a risk of non-compliance there. Another tool we rely on to mitigate risk there is yield control. So upon traceability exercises, what we do through that tool is ensure that we cannot make purchases on a given plot or from a given farm beyond what that farm is physically in capacity to produce. And so finally, the last piece of our strategy relies on forest protection. So we have made the decision to invest significantly in forest protection as our main risk mitigation strategy. So our due diligence approach enables us to ensure that we only import in the EU compliant beans, but we know that isn't enough to structurally address risks of deforestation, and specifically future risks of deforestation. So this is why we have decided to invest significantly in forest protection moving forward. And for today's conversation, there were more elements that I wanted to share. So if we could move to the next slide. What I wanted to share is, first of all, a sense of the challenges that we at Barry Callebaut have faced in the road towards compliance with the EUDR. So in the last decades, roughly 90% of deforestation has been linked to forest being converted to agricultural use. If you zoom on cocoa, roughly 50% of cocoa expansion since the 60s is associated with deforestation. So EUDR is a challenge, including for our industry. But one of the biggest challenges that we have seen to address those trends is actually linked to traceability. Over the last years within the company, there has been a lot of work, a lot of efforts on traceability, and we have built experience on this. I think it's fair to say that with that experience, we don't see traceability as a complex per se exercise. For a company to be able to trace cocoa back to a farm, a cocoa plot needs to be mapped, evidence of purchase collected, and yield control exercised. However, the scale at which traceability is required for compliance with EUDR has been challenging in the last months, and specifically in the context of the cocoa supply chain that is very dynamic and composed mostly of smallholder farmers. So there has been obviously other challenges, and some that we are still looking to address. The regulation is very prescriptive on the nature of the product that can be imported in the EU. It needs to be deforestation-free, legal, traceable, and the regulation broadly describes what risk assessment or risk mitigation measures and tools should be used to reach that outcome. But those, I would say, this is not extremely specific in the regulation. And we have used this as an opportunity to really build an approach that mirrors our needs and our functionalities as a business. It's also fair to say, though, that with that liberty and how to reach that outcome, we would still welcome additional guidance on some point that the regulation still hasn't precisely defined, and this is something that we are looking forward to in the months leading to implementation. The second point I wanted to share today is perhaps more personal. So I'm often asked how, in my position, I overcome some of the contradictions that exist between sustainability and business. For instance, between the level of control that is required by due diligence as described in EUDR and sourcing practices. And so within Barry Callebaut, to comply with EUDR, the choice we made was to have an approach structured around minimizing risk of non-compliance. We mirrored the no or non-negligible risk element of the regulation in our thought process to design our approach, but also in our operations to comply with the regulation. And I think this has been extremely useful, creating a spirit of collaboration within the organization and specifically around the needs to adapt some of our processes. And to conclude, the third point I wanted to share with you today is that at Barry Callebaut, we will be ready to comply with EUDR by January 1st, 2025. In the road towards compliance, and specifically in the last 18 months, I have been extremely grateful for all the collaboration that we have seen across our industry with CSOs, exporting country governments. So we have taken part in national traceability pilots. We have benefited from a lot of knowledge that has been shared with us by various organizations. So generally, I feel like there has been a tremendous amount of collective energy deployed towards reaching compliance. And we are saying we will be ready by January 1st. We project that the spirit of collaboration will continue over the next few months, and specifically in the first months and in the first year of implementation of EUDR. So we really need to continue working in that collaborative spirit to ensure that we really value the learnings that I'm sure will come in the next 3 months and in the first moments of EUDR implementation.
Thank you, Juliette. That's really interesting to see how, it becomes a business decision as much as a compliance with a regulation. And we'll come back to that in the questions probably. Michael Amoa, I'd like to move over to you now for your opening remarks, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. And for us, EUDR, as we see, and as we have discussed, imposes some kind of challenge to the smallholder farmer. It places some burden on the smallholder farmer in terms of trying to put in place the necessary logistics and know how to be able to produce evidence to show compliance. Even though it is meant for the trader and the operator, the obligation is on the trader and the operator. It has indirect obligation on the smallholder farmer. And if you know the terrain or the cocoa industry in Ghana is dominated by smallholder farmers. 90% of smallholder farmers with farm size of less than 2 hectares cultivate cocoa in Ghana. And we noticed that there were existing private system. The private system just covers only 30% of the farms. So we have our 70%, which is not covered by traceability system. In that case, and also the fact that in Ghana, over 60% of cocoa is exported to the EU. So this put a huge burden on the country. And in Ghana too, Ghana Cocoa Board has by law the mandate to sell cocoa beans. So the burden of sale is on Cocoa Board. So if you look at these circumstances, then it's become critical for us to take a decision, because other than that, if it's implemented, EUDR is being implemented, some farmers will be unjustifiably excluded from the market, not because they are causing deforestation or their production activity is not legal, but because they don't have the systems to produce the necessary evidence to show compliance. So Ghana decided to adopt a national approach to EUDR compliance. The reason is to be able to reduce compliance costs, because we have so many existing private systems that do not communicate with each other, and that leads to duplication of effort and increase in compliance costs. So we want to have a single source of truth that all of us can use and reduce the compliance costs, and also improve on the country's competitiveness. We want Ghana to be known as the major origin for EU compliant cocoa. We want to increase our share of EU markets. So with this, fortunately for us, in 2016, Ghana decided to have visibility in the cocoa industry, promote transparency and accountability in the cocoa industry, and decided to have a reliable farmer database. But we didn't have money to do it until 2019, when we had some facility from AFDB to start the cocoa management system, which is a comprehensive database of cocoa farmers. So when in 2020, EU published the EUDR, we saw we had the base data. We have all the polygon maps. We have all the household and 21 attribute data, which could be used to do traceability system. So we decided to have national systems to be able to assist the operator and the trader to be able to meet the EUDR requirements. So we developed the Ghana Cocoa Traceability System, which is a comprehensive traceability system under the principle of tracing one step backwards and tracking one step forward. An end-to-end traceability system that from the point of shipment, we can trace the cocoa to the plot of land. We'll be able to produce the geolocations of the plot that produce any parcel of cocoa. We went ahead to do the deforestation risk assessment model, which is anchored on the traceability system. We did that with European Forest Institute and FAO. We collaborated with them to do the design. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We looked at what the private system had done and look at the best practices in all the systems that have been done. We harnessed them and did the national system for cocoa farmers. We have also done the child labor risk assessment model. If you look at the EUDR, there's the legality side and there is the deforestation-free side of it. You need to provide evidence that you have fulfilled all of them. Under legality, we did a scoping together with EFI, European Forest Institute. We established legal framework for Ghana cocoa, and we saw 3 laws that we need to meet: the child labor rights, the child labor rights, and the human rights and labor rights, and land use rights, which is in Ghana you don't cultivate cocoa or any produce in a restricted forest. So the deforestation risk assessment model will provide evidence for deforestation as according to the FAO definition, and also provide evidence that the plot of land was not in a restricted forest, which is a legality aspect of it. And the child labor risk assessment model will also provide evidence that forced labor and child labor was not used to produce the cocoa. So the idea is to support the trader and operator, mindful of the fact that the EUDR gives the obligation to the trader and operator to be able to meet the EUDR requirement, i.e., to provide the Article 9 or the mandatory data requirement that they need to do the Article 10, which is the risk assessment that it is then the risk of non-compliance is negligible. So all cocoa sold by Cocoa Board will come with all the data. So far, we have mapped 1.2 farms, which covered 1.4 hectares, and we have covered 792,000 farmers. We have also set up, we have mapped all polygons in Ghana, cocoa polygons in Ghana, and we set up district offices that will do daily update of the farms and happenings within the cocoa sector. We have established end-to-end traceability systems so that we can produce the geolocation at the point of shipment. We have built the capacity of all stakeholders involved in the traceability system. And we have successfully, together with GIZ, piloted, purchased, transported, and received cocoa at our takeover center at the port through the traceability system. We have established the methodology and design for the deforestation risk assessment model. We are waiting for the forest cover maps from Forestry Commission to be able to establish the risk areas. We have done the instruments and tools for child labor risk assessment. We've done the condition scores already. We are now piloting the risk assessment tools as we speak. We are doing dry runs with a number of operators and traders to test the system right from the plot of land up to the competent authority, up to the tables or chocolate manufacturing. So in a nutshell, that's what we've done. We are hoping that what we've done will enable us capture market or capture a greater percent of the EU market and ensure that our traders or buyers, clients will have a seamless system to support their due diligence analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. That was really interesting and extremely thorough. You got a lot of information out there in a very short time, so that's great. Thank you very much. Dato, I'm going to move over to you now for your opening remarks, please.
Oke, terima kasih banyak telah mengundang saya untuk membicarakan topik terkait.
Thank you for inviting me to talk this topic about EUDR. I would like to make it short because the time is very limited, and I'm going to directly to present to you several points. The first one, we from the farmer, and we really support the policy of the EUDR for several reasons. The first one, majority of the farmers of in Indonesia is not directly with the farmer or the small close supply chain of the so they send to the collector and or not directly to the company. The farmer even didn't know where their products are there to the and only to the collector. And this is also happened to the farmers who have received the certification of sustainable palm oil, or the farmer who have received the sustainable palm oil certificate. All of them are only selling to the collector. Then the price is very low, received by the farmer. The independent farmer only receive 70% of 80% of the price from the per hectare, because the price is only decided by the collector. By Indonesian regulation, actually requires the company to buy the fresh fruit from the farmer through the farmers organization, but this policy was not complied by the farmer in the field. The company also did not have the initiative to strengthen its farmers around the area. For example, the best practice management to improve their productivity, and also strengthen the sustainability in the palm oil farmers palm oil farm. Although there is a voluntary commitment for sustainability practices, however, most it did not work. We didn't see any efforts, concrete action for the company to take the farmers, to include the farmers in their efforts. Regarding the palm oil farmers legality, only few farmers have a farm legality. For example, the STDB or registration of the cultivation. Without this cultivation certificate doesn't mean that they are illegal. They are really legal, and they are located in the right location and not within a forest area. To get the legality of this certificate is actually easy. That is through the mapping conducted by the farmer themselves to obtain the geological that is required by the EUDR. So if there's a geolocation or coordinates of the point of this farmer, this will facilitate or helps the regulation of the cultivation certificate. But for this matter, there are no mapping has been done both by the company and also the initiative or by the government. Regarding the policy of this cultivation registration certificate, it also has been regulated, including the funding aspect. In the regulation, it has been said that there is a connection between the regional budget and to this, but there's no action. So the legality aspect in the UDR, in our opinion, by the farmer, this is to accelerate or to encourage the Indonesian government to actively work and care for the small farmer. To build on what said about EUDR, there are some regulations like fair price and services, and the farmer must provide the geolocation or their coordinates. And there's also the test of compliance, and also some issues on the social conflicts with the farmers. And the fact is that there are many farmers, palm oil farmers, who are actually in conflict with the company, and there are some in practice and also this will improve our bargaining position, and we want to work with several farmers organizations, including the Village Association in Indonesia. All of them agree with the UDR, provided that the company can buy the palm oil at a fair price. If there are partnership or if there are support with the supply chain between the company and the farmer will improve their income and from their fresh fruit buns. And if they are directly connected with the supply chain of the big company, the small farmer can prepare their products to sell to EU by accommodating 100% of the EUDR requirements. However, the problem is that the small farmer doesn't have any manufacturing facility, so we only relied on the existing manufacturing palm oil. So we need direct investment to the farmer who performed the sustainability principle without deforestation. So, ladies and gentlemen, we from the SPK, we have provided prepared the geolocation for our farmers in our members in 21 sub-districts of 30,000 plots of 120,000 hectares managed by 30,000 small farms in Indonesia. However, it is difficult for us to get the company to partner with the traceable farmers. So to connect the European market, so we have established a forest protector foundation to support our members who perform forest conservation. At the moment, there are 6,000 hectares conserved by the farmers. However, the issue is that again, these farmers who are performing the conservation, they sell their pest fruit bunch only to the collector and not directly connected with the company's supply chain. So the foundation will collect some funding from donors from government to support provide the benefit or incentive that traceable for the farmers who perform forest conservation. What are the concrete action that we can do from different stakeholders to support smallholders in Indonesia to fulfill this EUDR? We have several opinions. The first, there's a need, urgent need for financial support and technical support, which are substantial to ensure that the small farmer in Indonesia are not excluded from the supply chain of European Union. We estimate that the fund of 70 to 200 euros per farmer to fulfill the small farmer scale farmer. That is for geolocation. Then there's also to build the parliament institution for legality and also for training. The next is we need to consider think of direct investment right to the farmer, to the small farmer scale by revitalizing the cooperatives and farmers organization in Indonesia, for example, micro and medium micro enterprise, just like in Europe, by building small mini manufacturing facilities, small scale manufacturing facilities. They have fulfilled EUDR and have commitment for preventing deforestation. I think the investment of value is very small, by 300,000 euros for 5 tons per hour manufacturing facility. It can produce, it can cover 600,000 hectares of small farmers without, and all of them are traceable. I think there are several things that I think that the farmers should support for deforestation. I think that is our thinking in this webinar, and I hope it can be useful for all of us.
Thank you, Dato. That was great. I will hand over now to Katya for your opening remarks. Katya, sorry, I don't want to rush you, but if you could keep them relatively succinct, just because we're running a bit behind time, and then we've got more time for Q&A.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the invitation to Fern and Mighty Earth. Thanks a lot. So I'm Katja Albrecht. I'm advisor in the project Sustainable Agriculture for Forest Ecosystems, called SAFE. We are funded by the European Commission, by the German Ministry for Cooperation and Development, and the Dutch Foreign Affairs Ministry. And we started working last year. So we are preparing partner countries for the EUDR. So we are always cooperating. We are jointly working with partner countries. Maybe you could move to the next slide. Exactly. So we are currently working in 10 countries. I picked 2 examples, which I will present in a short while, from Ecuador and Indonesia, but we are working in other countries as well. So, and here are our objectives. So we are always working at several levels in GIZ. So we are working on the one hand here with supply chain actors preparing for the EUDR requirements, meaning we are supporting the collection of geolocation data, supporting existing traceability systems or the expansion of systems, setting up systems depending on the country context. We are also working together with multiple actors in multi-stakeholder partnerships to propose policies that are providing an enabling environment for deforestation-free production, but we are also supporting smallholder farmer associations in accessing additional finance from existing financing schemes or schemes that are yet to be set up. And we are also supporting work at local level directly with smallholder farmer producers in terms of sustainable production practices. So we do support trainings on sustainable production practices, deforestation-free production, but also on legality issues like land right issues. There are two more objectives which are linked to a global and regional exchange of activity or of knowledge. So one, we have started a regional technical exchange in Latin America and in Southeast Asia, and soon there will be one on coffee in Eastern Africa, hopefully. And there is also a task to coordinate contributions of European member states to the so-called Team Europe initiative on deforestation-free value chains. So we are hosting a secretariat that will support the activities and, for example, the monitoring of the Team Europe initiative. But we will also organize a number of global events in which local and regional experiences are being exchanged. So next slide, please. So I will move to one example from Ecuador, because Ecuador has done a lot already. They started early preparing for the requirements of the EU Deforestation Regulation. So there are a couple of activities our colleagues in Ecuador also engaged in. For example, the Interinstitutional Committee for Sustainable Production and Marketing. It's a multi-stakeholder committee in which, for example, tools are being identified that can be used by small scale producers, such as traceability tools or tools to identify legality of production. We have supported a national risk assessment, which identifies where certain risks could be occurring in the relevant supply chains. So related to, for example, human rights or labor rights, but also deforestation. And lastly, there is a government system for registering farmers. It has been there before the EUDR was in place, but it can be used for the registration of farmers. And our colleagues have supported a training of trainers course on traceability and are also supporting the registration of family farmers in Ecuador. So some information on the local level. So we are implementing activities on the ground in Orellana and Sucumbíos in Eastern Ecuador. And here, the local roundtable on sustainable palm oil and sustainable cocoa is being supported in terms of EUDR advisory. So a training of trainers has also been developed on the EUDR requirements linked to due diligence, geolocation, and risk assessment and mitigation. Linked to this, due diligence pilots have been implemented on the ground together with smallholder producer organizations so that locally risks are already being identified and addressed. Of course, due diligence is the task of the importers in Europe, but it may have to start a bit earlier to collect information locally. But yeah, the legal obligation lies with the importing companies. Just two more points, sorry, can you go back? Yeah, so traceability pilots have also been implemented together with producer organizations, and we always pay attention to the inclusion of women, young people, indigenous people, or whoever may be marginalized in the production system. So one more example from Indonesia very quickly. Here we are working with the planning ministry, Bapenas, and we have started a so-called SAFE challenge. So there was a public competition, call for proposals, and consortia of companies, smallholder, producer organizations, civil society organizations, or other civil society organizations could apply. And we are currently in, or will be finalizing agreements in a couple of weeks, and the topics that are covered are, for example, collection and registration of smallholder data, expansion of traceability systems, or the STDB registration. I think Datu also talked about these cultivation licenses, which is very important component of our work in Indonesia. The more topics such as land rights, forest monitoring, and so on, but there will be work in Central Sulawesi and West Kalimantan, so that will be implemented by a couple of consortia. And we are also about to finalize a cooperation with the organization, the Indonesian enterprise PT Surveyor Indonesia, to include smallholder data that is being collected or will be collected as part of the Safe Challenge projects, and include this data into the National Dashboard for Commodities. If you could just click further, I think it will be shown. And exactly, so we are not directly supporting the National Dashboard, but we are testing the data formats, for example, and how data can be collected in an efficient way and cost-effective way, and can be inserted in the government-owned initiative, the National Dashboard for Commodities. And Surveyor Indonesia will then validate this data. So it's a requirement in Indonesia to aggregate, to insert data into this platform, to validate it, and then it can be used by actors in the supply chain. So far, the work has been concentrated on palm oil, but we are also working on cocoa natural rubber under the SAFE project, and it will be, these commodities will also be in the focus of our work. And I think for the sake of time, I'm not mentioning the World Resources Institute and the Linux Foundation. That's part of our global work on supporting digital public infrastructure. But if there's time, I can say a bit more about it later.
Thank you, Katja, and sorry to rush you slightly, but there was a lot of work going on there, and again, lots of super information, and there's lots of questions that people are asking. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. I think we're going to watch a short video now.
Ghana is getting ready to implement the EUDR. I'm here in the Etiwa East District of the Eastern Region exploring this question with cocoa farmers. Cocoa farming is an important activity in this region, and Cocoa Board has helped farmers to map out the entirety of their farms and farm plots.
Cocoa Board
So farmers in this area at least have their farms mapped, and they can show that they are not deforesting, which means that they are EUDR compliant and can continue exporting their cocoa beans. But one other benefit of this data capture means that they have accurate information about their farms, which can be used to access financial services. The EUDR preparedness is bringing multiple impacts for farmers.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody who's spoken on the panel. We will now move into a bit of a panel discussion, and we'll try and at the same time, I think, start answering some of the questions because there are lots of Q&A. If you all want to put your cameras back on again, and then everybody can see you, that will be super. The 4 speakers from the panel, if everybody's still with us. Michael, Juliet, Katja, Dato. Are we still with us? If you can switch your cameras on, that would be super. Are we still here? Excellent, Michael's there. Excellent, exactly the person we wanted to see. So we've just seen what's happening in Ghana, Michael, and perhaps you could explain a bit more about the process that the Ghana Cocoa Board went through to map the cocoa maps, and a bit more information about kind of what we've just seen in the video and exactly how that's happening in reality.
Thank you very much. We started by engaging over 500 surveyors. And we bought GPS with the accuracy of 3 meters. Then the surveyors went to map the cocoa farms with farmers organizing themselves into group because there are issues of boundary issues. They use flowers to indicate their boundaries. So they need to go in groups to be able to map and get their boundaries right. So once that is done, the farmer is issued with their chit. Then we'll go and set the farmer up in a system. The enumerators will go now enumerate the farmers as 21 attribute data, which will be used for child labor analysis and for other analysis, income analysis, and other analysis that in the long term we can leverage on to ensure that we serve the farmer better. So in a nutshell, that was what was done for the data side of it. Then we engage a consultant a vendor to do the software for traceability. Under the principle of a guide, I was tracing one step backwards and tracking one step forward. So we did that with all stakeholders because we have the license buying companies, which are private companies. They are going to use the system, so you have to involve them in the system. We engage a lot of the civil society and NGOs to also express their views on the system that we have developed, and that fed into reforming it. We engage the private companies that have existing system to look at the best practices, the challenges they were facing, to avoid those challenges that they face with their systems. So in a nutshell, that is how it was done. The farmers were issued with a unique ID card. They have a unique farm ID in the system, but it's a long ID. The farmers can't remember. So we've used color coding. We have color coded the farms so that the farmer can easily say, this is my yellow farm, my green farm. And in the system, the first custody holder, which is purchasing card, knows which of the farms are the yellow farm. Because the farmers they own more than 2 farms. So that's how we did it, and we made it very simple for the farmer to understand and for all actors to also understand. We've captured even the transportation system. We want to preserve the identity of the geolocation as it moves along the supply chain. Thank you so much.
Excellent, thank you, Michael. And Raoni, I see that you stayed with us, which is excellent. Thank you very much. There's quite a lot of questions from participants about the government, the Brazilian government's role in leading on the work you're doing and underwriting what's happening and who's paying for it. Perhaps you could explain a little bit more exactly what the role of the government is in all this.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, we have different roles at different levels. Of course, the Ministry of Agriculture wants to help the farmers that want to show the level of the production. And also as coordinators of the plan to reduce deforestation, we incentivize monitoring systems that do that. But I think it's important to highlight that there are 2, let's say, types of traceability. Of course, there is a traceability you're talking about here. That's the one the farmer can go there, download the data, show the buyer, show to the EU. And so let's say that's traceability as a form of certification of sorts, or public certification at least. And also there is the traceability we do as part of our law enforcement. And that's something we are able to do for the whole country. And of course, we don't need the approval of the farmer to check whether it's doing something legal or not, and to cross with different sorts of data, especially data which is not public, including invoice data, cattle movements, and amongst others. And that kind of work still going on, law enforcement work still going on, while some states and also the federal level also helping farmers to show what's the level of compliance.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks for explaining that. That makes it clearer. And Data, I wanted to come back to you as well in terms of the fund that you were talking about, and if you could perhaps give us a bit more detail about how that exactly works and how you think that could help smallholder farmers supply the EU with sustainable palm oil.
Ya, menurut saya,
Yeah, in my opinion,
ada kendala-kendala
there are
yang
some problems or
dihadapi
hindrance
oleh petani sawit.
suffered by the
Oke,
palm
bahwa
oil farmers.
kami di organisasi
Okay,
SPS itu
indeed,
telah
in
menyiapkan
our organization in
poligon
SPKS, we
atau
have prepared
geolocation
polygons
untuk
or
petani farm,
geolocation
karena itu
for our
sebagai salah
members
satu
because
prasyarat
that's one of the
untuk
pre-requirements,
petani
right?
sawit masuk
For
di
the
dalam
palm oils to be included or
keanggotaan organisasi.
into
Jadi
the organization
kalau mau
membership.
menjadi
So if they
bagian dari
want to
organisasi
be
SPKS
part of
harus
our organization, SPKS,
ada data yang
then there
jelas,
should be
termasuk
clear
geolokasi.
data, including their
Tapi untuk
geolocation.
petani-petani sawit yang
However,
tidak
for
tergabung di SPKS, tentu
farmers who
mereka
are not
tidak seperti
part of
kami.
the organization, they are
Dan
unlike
karena
us.
itu perlu ada inisiatif dan
So there
tantangan
could be some
yang
initiative
lebih
of
membantu
funding
aspek-aspek
that may
teknis.
help the technical
Seperti yang
aspects.
saya sampaikan tadi,
As
bahwa
I
dalam
mentioned earlier in the presentation slide,
fokus di situ,
I want to focus on
bahwa
that matter,
upaya-upaya yang kami
that the
lakukan
efforts that we
dalam
do
hal
in terms of
pendanaan itu
funding
untuk melatih
are
petani. Jadi
to
petani
train
itu
these
nanti
farmers.
dilatih
So the
untuk
farmers will be
menggunakan
trained
GPS.
to how to use the
Dan
GPS,
juga
for example,
mereka akan
and
menggunakan
they
smartphone.
will use
Jadi
the smartphone.
segala macam
So all of the
pertanyaan-pertanyaan
questions
terkait dengan
about
histori lahan,
the history of the
terkait
land, of the
dengan
plots, and related
kapan
to
mereka
the
membangun kebun
when
sawit,
they built this
dan juga aspek-aspek terkait dengan
farm
pertanyaan
farm and all aspects
kredit,
related to the
dan
questions
juga
on credit
penggunaan buruh
and the use of
perkebunan sawit, semuanya akan ditanyakan
and
melalui
all of these
menggunakan
questions will be
GPS dan juga
asked, and we will use the
Dan
GPS
kami
and
melatih
smartphone.
petani-petani di
Additionally, we will
desa.
train these
Misalnya
farmers
satu
in
desa
our village.
itu
For example,
5
in one village
dilatih,
consists of 5 farmers will be
dan
trained,
setelah dilatih
and
mereka
after
akan
the
melakukan
training, they will
pemetakan, dan
make their
kami
own mapping
melakukan
independently, and we
monitoring
do
dan juga pengolahan
perform
data.
monitoring and
Nah,
data
data-data
processing
tersebut
afterwards.
akan masuk ke
And
dalam
this data
server
later will
yang kami
be
buat. Tentu
put in our
menurut
servers.
kami, berdasarkan
So in my
pengalaman
opinion,
kami,
and based on our opinion,
pekerjaan
based
yang
on our experience, it seems
dan
like an
kami
easy job,
tidak memiliki
but
pendanaan yang
we
cukup
don't
untuk
have any
membantu
sufficient funding to
1 juta
help
petani sawit di
like 1
Indonesia
million of Indonesian
untuk
palm oil
memiliki
farmers
geolocation
to
dan
have
semuanya.
the
Karena itu
geolocation, all of
mungkin
them to have a
ada
geolocation.
keterlibatan
So it is important that
para
the
pihak
involvement of multi
untuk
stakeholders to be
menyiapkan
to
geolocation
prepare the this
dari para petani
geolocation
sawit. Kemudian
information
yang
of
kedua,
the farm
dana-dana yang bisa
farm
disiapkan juga adalah
the farmers. So the funding
untuk
that funding that
membangun
should be
lembaga
prepared also
petani
is
sawit.
to build the
Karena problemnya seperti
farmers
inilah, petani itu
institution.
masih
At the moment, these farmers are individuals. They work on individuals level, and cooperatives needs to be built. But the point here is that in response to the EUDR, it's easy to be done because the requirements are only geolocation. However, an important note here is that they can do that, or they can fulfill they can provide the requirements set by the EUDR. However, the company also must give their commitment so that they can provide services such as a good price or fair price, and also to provide other services like just training. So without this, I think it is quite difficult to achieve that. And the next point that I want to make is that the most important thing for the connectivity with the company in the supply chain with the European market there should be transparency from the palm oil companies. For palm oil commodity, they source their this from the clear sub-districts. So the palm oil organization or palm oil farmer will be will try to be to assist the farmers in the area. But the problem is that I can inform you that for palm oil sold to Europe will be sourced from sub-district, for example, A or B sub-district, and they don't know actually which are these are sourced from, which district are these sourced from. There are no transparency. So I think the involvement from the Indonesian government is important to market the product to EU market.
Thank you, Dato. And to move back from palm oil to chocolate for a minute, Juliette, I wanted to come back to you in terms of this question of sort of who needs to provide the support and where the finance needs to come from. I mean, is this a question for the private sector, for companies like yourselves, or is this more a question for governments or other institutions, other mechanisms to be put in place?
Maybe to answer your question and speak to some of the questions I've seen in the chat as well to what Darto just shared, what I can share is that on our side, we are investing a lot to reach EUDR compliance, and we are investing a lot to make sure that smallholders continue to be included in our supply chain. Our business relies on smallholder farming. So we have invested tremendously in traceability, filling some of the gaps I mentioned in the introduction as a key challenge. Tremendous efforts are going on at the moment from our traceability teams and our suppliers to make sure that we include as many as possible of smallholders in our supply chain. Traceability costs are borne by us at the moment. As I said as well earlier, we are piloting some of the government initiatives and very much welcoming those initiatives as well. So a lot of collaboration already happening and further expected there. But where that is not available, we see the investment as being our responsibility. And maybe to say something about deforestation monitoring, similarly there, we have invested significantly to ensure that we have the right tools to make correct assessments about what is at risk of non-compliance and ensuring that we have as much information as possible to make that decision prior to any sourcing decision being made.
Excellent, thank you. And Katja, to come back to you in terms of the challenges that both Michael and Darto have raised, where do you see as an agency that the gaps, I mean, you've mentioned various sort of projects that you're involved in, but where do you see the gaps that agencies like yourselves can fulfill, either yourselves or similar agencies in other countries in Europe?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. So, of course, when we are starting work in a partner country, we are, of course, always consulting many stakeholders, and we are looking for gaps or synergies. We analyze what projects are already there, or whether farmers are really part of a supply chain of a trader company. So we wouldn't do anything there. So we would, of course, look at those areas that are not supported yet, where the knowledge is not yet there. So we did a lot of, we exchanged knowledge about the EUDR as well, because it was necessary, especially at the local level. And we normally look at those independent farmers that are not yet part of an international supply chain, or who may be selling to this intermediary or the other intermediary. And we it's very important that farmers are the owners of their data. So normally we support them with tools and knowledge to collect their own farm data, and so that they can decide who to share it with. Yeah, I think that's, we are. So I think the greatest need is at the local level in many districts. Also, some districts, we are engaging more and more with the district level actors to exchange knowledge about the tools that can be used at the local level.
And at the local level, is it very much, as you're suggesting, a lack of knowledge, or is it, I mean, Darto talked about a lack of technical advice, a lack of financial need. I mean, do you see those needs as well, or is it also there's just a general lack of knowledge in terms of the EUDR and its existence and understanding exactly what it is?
Of course, that's only the first step. Of course, finance is an important issue, and I mentioned that we are currently with a think tank. We are collecting information on existing financial schemes in the countries, and we are analyzing what the obstacles are to accessing the financing, especially for smallholder organizations. And we will also support the drafting of proposals or any documents that are necessary to access funding. So of course, funding is a very important issue. And yeah, we are searching which tools can be used. Can it be carbon finance? Will it be payments for ecosystem services, or finance from private companies or public funds at the country level? So that's ongoing work, and we are going to present this also very soon on the Team Europe website.
Excellent, thank you. Roni, are you still there? If I can come back to you. Don't know if you're, yes, you are still there. Excellent, super. You're going to last the course. One of the questions we've received is, given that imports into the EU or exports from Brazil are obviously so important in the EU, do you think there'll be full operationalization of the system by December 2024? I mean, you mentioned that I think 25% of the farms were covered at the moment, or will compliance sort of need to continue after the end of the year?
Well, so the information we have from the Minister of Agriculture that the national system will be ready, but then we will be up to the farmer to provide the information to the system to export. And remembering that it's a system where if the farmer doesn't want to be in the system, or doesn't want to, or need to export, it doesn't need to be there. While let's say the universal system being developed by the states, which have also a national relevance, the rhythm of how much more people are going to join the system is really up to the decision at state level. Of course, we incentivize that, but then it's difficult to give a precise number or date of when it's going to happen.
Is that an optimistic yes, or is it a sort of a cautious no, it might take us a bit longer?
I think it is going to depend also on the signaling on the side of the EU. What happens sometimes, for instance, when the EU did not provide the FAQ and also did not provide the benchmark on the dates that what they were supposed to provide, that actually sent a wave of skepticism in some of the private sector here in Brazil, and actually led to some demobilization, and so I think that it's a two-side game, right? So it depends on how early and how hard the EU is going to require. That's going to also dictate partially the rhythm on the Brazilian side, especially when it comes to the farmers that need to go to the system to provide extra information to be able to export.
Okay, great, thank you. Juliette, coming back to you, you also mentioned this need for extra guidance from the EU, and we know that we're waiting on guidance from the EU. I mean, there's also a few questions as well from you for you on the social side as well, and how sort of the biggest challenges are for the smallholders. Is it the transparency? Is it the data? What are these big challenges, and how are you working with them to overcome these challenges? And again, is what is the guidance that you really need now from the EU to help you implement the EUDR?
I think guidance on the social topics and the human rights aspects of the regulation would be very much welcome. So there was a document that wasn't officially circulated, but that nevertheless reached us a few months ago, that gave perspective on what would be the interpretation of the human rights aspect in the face of EUDR. This is the interpretation that so far we have relied upon in how we approach EUDR. It is our understanding that the deforestation regulation seeks to address primarily deforestation, and that there are other regulations and policies that we implement at company level to work on human rights issues in the cocoa supply chains. I think there is also a need for guidance on some of the more technical topics around DDS and the responsibilities of upstream suppliers, and specifically how that works within the EU. So for now, on our side, we know we have to ascertain that due diligence is being performed appropriately by any suppliers that, for instance, provide us with products already in the EU, whereby we still have a responsibility. So this is the kind of topic where I think further guidance and I think more specific information would be extremely helpful and help us make our approach the most efficient possible and the most relevant possible as well to be compliant in the next few months.
And you mentioned that normally you should be compliant by the end of the year, I think, with the deadline. Is that continuing to work with the suppliers that you've always worked with, or have you had to change suppliers to make sure that you're compliant with the EUDR?
No, we're working with the suppliers that we have in our supply chain. So obviously, there's been a lot of work on our side on, first of all, formalizing what our approach towards compliance should be and cascading that to suppliers. So providing some guidance, some training, transparency as well on the assessments that we run in our supply chain, on the conclusions that we've reached, where we see some risk. So we are sharing that proactively with suppliers in our supply chain, and we intend on continuing to work with them very closely in the next months.
Excellent, thank you. And moving from chocolate to coffee, which is always a good combination. Katja, one of our somebody in the audience has asked, what's your engagement on coffee? If you could give a bit of an outline as to what the work you're doing there.
Yes, I mean the commodities that we are working on are differing from country to country. So we sometimes have to prioritize one supply chain over the other. I mean, it also depends on the partner's interest, and but we are working on coffee in Ecuador. It's not the main activity, but it's a secondary activity in Ecuador. It will be targeted in Uganda and in Vietnam. So we are just starting work in Uganda. So the work has not been initiated. It will start beginning of October, and we are just engaging with a number of actors that are already engaged in Uganda, like the ITC, for example. So we will find synergies with the activities there. And I think that's, and DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it's one of 3 value chains. So it's also cocoa and natural rubber in DRC. So for more concrete information on, for example, Ecuador, I would have to refer to my colleagues, and I can bring you in contact or find out. So, because I'm having the oversight of 10 countries, but not all the details.
And do you see that there are different challenges in terms of the different commodities covered by the EUDR? Are there, given that you cover a range, I mean, we've obviously dealt with sort of palm oil and chocolate specifically, but do you see it's more complicated to implement with certain commodities than it is with others, or is it dependent very much on from country to country rather than, or smallholder farms rather than sort of the commodity itself?
Yes, I mean, I know, for example, in Ecuador, the mapping of farms in the palm oil and cocoa sector has advanced quite a lot, but coffee is not yet at this point. So I think also the voluntary commitments on deforestation-free supply chains concentrated on palm oil and cocoa, soy and timber beforehand. So I think the coffee sector is maybe not as prepared as others. But I hear different signals from different countries. So, for example, India seems to be quite well prepared, at least what I heard from one partner there. And yeah, of course, Vietnam is working a lot at the landscape level. And yeah, it's, of course, a challenge if there are many smallholder farms and many, if the sector is more fragmented, but yeah, we will find tools to collect geolocation data in a more efficient way there.
Thank you.
But at the farm level, not at the landscape level.
Yeah, okay.
That's important to say.
And Dato, I wanted to ask you a similar question that I asked Raoni before in terms of compliance by the deadline by the end of the year. Is that something that seems achievable in terms of palm oil from Indonesia?
Ya, kalau untuk petani
For the farmers, I think we are optimistic and we are ready. The problem is who will manage the oil palms that are traceable or have the geolocation. It all depends on the existing palm oil companies or corporation. So it is necessary to have dialogues between the farmers and the private sectors or the companies and also the buyers in European Union. It is important to basically share these issues to be able to communicate these issues. And we also really depend on the big companies because they have their factories to process the palm and that are traceable. They also have their tanks. They also have the vessels or ship to basically transport our products to Europe because farmers, we don't have those facilities. So we really rely on them. But if you want to expedite this process, as I mentioned before, that direct investment is necessary on the community of farmers. And the investment must be concrete investments. And I am aware that European Union or EU basically will require about 4 tons of oil palms from Indonesia. And we are capable of meeting the requirements there. But again, the classic problem is that we do not own factories or processing facilities. So the market or the EU market should invest directly in the farmers or the farmers who are prepared, and they also are prepared with the traceability and they have declared on against the deforestation as required, and we are ready to do that. I would say the investment is not that big of amount to basically have a small scale factory with the 5-ton scale production. And if the factories exist, then it will basically open up the access to the EU market. And then when the farmers can also manage and also basically have their contribution with the management or managing the factories, then I guess this will help the farmers. So we are ready. However, some companies are not transparent and they are not ready. And that would be our biggest challenge.
Dato, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you in a second because we're getting towards the end of the session. But if you just want to wrap up, that would be, I'm sorry to cut you off in mid-flow.
Okay, thank you so much. For example, we are partnering with 2 companies, exporting companies to Europe and a local company. And the funders are from GIZ. But in our side, it is not for EU. So we do not export the products to EU because there are specific challenges. Because our perspective, or the company's perspectives will be to use segregated factories, not the mass balance.
Okay.
And it is also another challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. So sorry to cut you off there, but I think in general, what you were saying is there can be positives here for the smallholders.
No problem.
They get the market if they comply. And that's a very quick question. I just wanted to, we need to finish because we're nearly over time, but I just wanted really a one-word answer from you all very quickly in terms of the EUDR is obviously focused on deforestation, but it sounds like this can be good for smallholders as well if implemented correctly. Juliette, is that something you would agree with?
Yes, definitely. I think at least this is how we see it, and I think it can be beneficial. We are investing in forest protection, for instance. I think it creates a number of benefits across the board, for sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Katja. Do you see benefits for smallholders as well?
Yes, so I think what is really important is that with data, smallholder farmers can create long-term business relationships with trading companies, but it can also facilitate access to financial services if farm data is available and if the overall farm management is improved.
Super, excellent, thank you. Raoni, I think you wanted to mention a quick remark on readiness as well.
Yeah, thank you, Philippa. Thank you all for the great insights, also the colleagues from other countries. I think it's just a message more on also to the EU. I think we should all take the issue of readiness as a step-by-step approach. You know, no policy this complex is perfect the first day. No system this complex is perfect the first day. I think what we need to do is to start off what we have at hand, which is already a lot, from what we can see from the experiences from Ghana, from Indonesia, from Brazil, and build up from there, right? And of course, in the meantime, there are going to be bumps, there are going to be extra requirements. Brazil is going to complain, of course, when they see some of those requirements being unfair or not. That's part of the process. I think what we should not do is to say that we need a perfect system, which nobody knows what exactly is, before we can start something, before we can start working out a policy, being able to export, showing the good quality of our products.
Excellent, thank you. Wise advice there. I think that the EU should probably heed on many things. Thank you. And Michael, a final word from you. Is it good for smallholders as well?
Yes, I think the farmers can leverage all the tools and systems put in place to improve on financial deepening, to improve on agri insurance, to improve on credit, to promote credit input systems, and to have access to the carbon market. There's a whole lot that it also helps even the regulator to get closer to precision agriculture, give them tailor-made interventions that will improve their livelihood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a great positive way to end, Michael. Thank you for outlining all those other advantages as well. And I'm sorry to rush everybody at the end. Thanks everybody for their excellent questions, and thank you for the panelists and all the information you've shared today. So I think it was a good discussion. There'll be a full recording of today's event, the slides and the transcript that will be made available to all attendees. And I think if you have any other further questions, feel free to reach out to Fern and Mighty Earth. And I think the details should appear on the screen. They've not appeared, but I'm sure if you contact Thea at Mighty Earth, she will be able to help. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good day.